Have you ever felt like something was guiding you silently, mysteriously beneath the surface of reality? Not fate, not coincidence, but a kind of sacred timing. Moments that arrive without warning yet feel too meaningful to be random. Carl Jung had a name for this synchronicity. And for him, it all began with a simple but haunting question. What if the universe doesn't speak in logic, but in symbols? Long before Jung became one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century, he was a boy plagued by visions that defied science, reason, even sanity. Strange dreams, premonitions, a feeling that reality was not as linear or as logical as it appeared. One of those visions would stay with him forever. I saw yellow waves, broken ruins, and thousands of lives lost. 2 weeks later, it returned more violent. And a voice inside said, "This is real. It will happen. Don't doubt it." Soon after World War I began, but Jung didn't believe he was hallucinating. He realized something far more unsettling. These visions were not personal. They were collective. He was tapping into what he would later call the collective unconscious, a deep reservoir of memory, myth, and meaning shared by all of humanity. As he matured, Jung noticed something that defied every scientific law he had studied. Meaningful events often occurred together without any clear cause. They didn't follow the rules of time, space, or causality, but they meant something, deeply. And that meaning itself, not the logic, was the hidden thread connecting them. Even his childhood shaped this view. My parents, Jung said, were people of the Middle Ages. My father was a village pastor, bound by beliefs passed down for 800 years. Jung was raised in a world steeped in dogma and religion, yet he felt something stirring underneath it all. Something ancient, symbolic, and deeply human. This upbringing planted the seeds of a question he would spend his entire life exploring. Can events be connected by meaning rather than cause? And if so, what does that say about the nature of reality itself? At the time, no scientific model could explain these phenomena, but quantum physics would soon catch up. Consider the double-slit experiment, a mind-bending discovery in quantum mechanics. Particles behave differently, depending on whether or not they're being observed. In other words, the act of observing changes what is real. To Jung, this wasn't just a quirk of physics, it was validation, a bridge between psychology and the cosmos. Synchronicities, he believed, were not hallucinations. They were echoes of a deeper order where consciousness and matter are not separate, but one and the same. But synchronicity isn't just a lofty concept buried in ancient texts or hidden behind ivory towers of theory. It shows up in your life, sometimes quietly, sometimes like lightning. Imagine this. You're stuck in a job that drains you. Your future feels foggy. You keep asking yourself, is this really what I'm meant to do? One weekend, almost on a whim, you attend a local event. You sit in the back, not expecting much. Then a speaker takes the stage. Someone who left their old life behind and built something entirely new. Something meaningful. Something real. Their words hit a nerve. After the talk, you introduce yourself. That conversation turns into a connection. That connection becomes a mentorship. And that mentorship, it gives you the exact guidance and courage you've been craving. Was it chance? Or was it something more? Something synchronistic? These moments when life seems to conspire in your favor aren't random, Jung would argue. They're expressions of a deeper rhythm, one you can't measure with science, but you can feel in your bones. And Jung knew this not just from observation, but from experience. As a young man, he didn't just have vivid visions, he witnessed physical events that defied explanation. One summer, while quietly studying, he heard a loud crack like a gunshot. Rushing into the room, he discovered a heavy oak table had split clean down the middle. No cause, no pressure, just a break. 2 weeks later, another sound. This time inside a cupboard. A bread knife recently used had snapped into multiple pieces untouched. These strange disturbances weren't staged. They were spontaneous. And they awakened in Jung a fierce curiosity. What forces lie beneath the surface of the visible world? That question drove him deep into the study of the psyche, into parapsychology, mysticism, and the occult. Not out of superstition, but from direct experience. He didn't dismiss the extraordinary. He documented it. His medical dissertation, published in 1902, was titled On the Psychology and Pathology of So-Called Occult Phenomena. Even then, he was trying to give language and legitimacy to the mysteries we all encounter, but few dare to name. Years later, renowned physicist Niels Bohr would echo this strange truth from the world of quantum mechanics. Everything we call real is made of things that cannot be regarded as real. Jung recognized this parallel immediately. Reality isn't as fixed as we think. What we see, what we expect, and what we believe all shape the very world we move through. And sometimes it reacts. One of the most striking moments in Jung's life happened during a conversation with Sigmund Freud. The two were discussing parapsychology. Freud dismissed Jung's ideas as nonsense. Suddenly, Jung felt a sensation like his diaphragm was made of iron and heating up. And just as he said this, a loud crack erupted from the bookcase beside them. Both men jumped. That, Jung said calmly, is an example of catalytic exteriorization. Freud scoffed. Sheer bosh! Jung didn't flinch. In a moment, it will happen again. And it did. Another sharp, unexplained detonation rang out from the very same bookcase. Later, in Memories, Dreams, Reflections, Jung would write, "To this day, I do not know what gave me this certainty, but I knew beyond all doubt that the report would come again." Freud, usually unmoved, simply stared at him, speechless. It was one of many moments where Jung's path diverged from Freud's. While Freud focused on drives and repression, Jung was digging towards something bigger, a field of intelligence beneath reality itself. He once described meeting Freud in Vienna. "We talked for 13 hours straight. We didn't even realize how exhausted we were until it was over. But it was fascinating. He was the elder. He had great experience. I came to learn." But as time went on, their paths split. Jung wasn't satisfied with the materialist model. He had seen too much, felt too much. And deep down he knew there is more to the human experience than biology and behavior. There is meaning, and meaning is never accidental. In 1928, as Jung was deep in the creation of the vivid mandalas that would eventually fill the pages of his Red Book, something remarkable happened. He received a package from Frankfurt. Inside was an ancient Taoist text sent by his close friend and sinologist Richard Wilhelm. It was called The Secret of the Golden Flower, a mystical Chinese manual on inner alchemy meditation and the path to spiritual wholeness. As Jung turned its delicate pages, he was stunned. What he saw in those Chinese symbols mirrored the very images that were emerging from his own unconscious. It wasn't just a coincidence, it was a convergence. He later wrote beneath one of his mandalas, "When I was painting this picture of the golden, well-fortified castle, Wilhelm sent me a 1,000-year-old Chinese text on the yellow castle, the germ of the immortal body. It was synchronicity in action. The East meeting the West. The outer world delivering to him what his inner world had already begun to reveal." Jung's fascination with mandalas and with Eastern philosophy was not decorative. It was essential. To him, the mandala wasn't just a symbol. It was the architecture of the soul, a map of wholeness born from chaos. This moment marked a turning point. It confirmed what Jung had long suspected, that the unconscious wasn't just a psychological junkyard of discarded thoughts. Freud believed the unconscious was a byproduct of consciousness, Jung once said, a storage room for repressed material. But I saw it differently. I saw it as a living matrix, the foundation of consciousness itself, creative, autonomous, intelligent. At the heart of this realization were archetypes, universal patterns that shape the psyche and ripple through the physical world. They are not learned. They are inherited. They live in myth, dream, and synchronicity. Jung's encounter with the secret of the golden flower ignited something deeper. From Wilhelm, he wrote, "The spark leapt across and kindled a light that became one of the most significant events of my life. I feel I received more from him than from any other man." One image in particular stayed with him. A yogi meditating with 5 human figures growing from his head, and 5 more sprouting from each of theirs. To Jung, this was no metaphor. It was a depiction of transformation, the shedding of false selves, and the emergence of the unified self. This journey led Jung to one of his most radical ideas, a singular unified reality beneath all things. He called it the unus mundus, the one world. It's the idea that everything matter, mind, symbol, and soul is connected. That the physical and the psychic are not separate realms, but expressions of one field of being. In 1930, Jung publicly introduced the term synchronicity during his memorial address for Wilhelm. He described it as a peculiar principle active in the world so that things happen together somehow and behave as if they were the same, even though for us, they are not. It was his way of naming the invisible thread. Jung believed humanity was on the cusp of a transformation, not just spiritual, but psychological. A great change of our psychological attitude is imminent. That is certain, he said. Why? Because the only real danger that exists is man himself. He is the great danger. And we are pitifully unaware of it. We know nothing of man, far too little. To Jung, studying the psyche wasn't optional. It was urgent, because without understanding ourselves, we become the architects of our own destruction. The soul, he said, is a complicated thing. It can take half a lifetime to reach psychological maturity. This isn't just therapy, it's a kind of education, an ancient philosophical kind, one that touches every part of who we are and demands that we grow. Jung saw in Taoism a powerful ally. The Tao, like the unconscious, is not linear. It doesn't command. It flows. In Taoist thought, balance is found through opposites yin and yang, light and dark, movement and stillness. Jung believed the same, that true wholeness comes from the integration of opposites, the union of consciousness and the unconscious. This is the purpose of his psychology, not to fix you, but to return you to your center, to align the ego with the self, to bring the outer world and the inner world into harmony. Just as Taoist sages aim to live in flow with the Tao, Jungians seek to live in flow with the self, to see life not as random, but as meaningful, not as broken, but as waiting to be made whole. This is where synchronicity reveals its deepest power, not just as a phenomenon, but as a path. In Jung's view, individuation. The journey to becoming a whole, authentic self doesn't happen in a straight line. It's not a climb. It's a spiral, a circumambulation, a sacred circling around a center we slowly come to recognize as our own. And what sits at the heart of that center? For Jung, it is always the mandala. The mandala is not just a piece of art. It's a psychic blueprint, a visual symbol of the self organizing itself through chaos. It shows us what we're orbiting, what our soul is trying to become. In every true mandala, there is always a symbol at its core. The sun. A castle. A golden flower. Each one reflects a deeper truth, the divine pattern behind our becoming. When that center reveals itself, the personality begins to unify. The fragmented parts start to speak. The opposites, light and shadow, masculine and feminine, mind and body, marry. This is what Jung called the Mysterium Conjunctionis, the sacred union, and it became the title of his final great work. To Jung, this was not just psychological, it was spiritual alchemy, a transformation in which consciousness becomes radiant and clear. And in that clarity we feel what mystics have described for millennia, the deep, undivided oneness of being. Across cultures, this wholeness takes many names: Atman, Tao, Christ, symbols of the self connected to the divine breath that animates the cosmos. Or, as Jung wrote, it is no longer you who live, it lives you. To understand synchronicity, Jung turned not to Western science, but to an ancient oracle, the I Ching, the Book of Changes. He didn't just study it. He used it in psychotherapy sessions in his own life, like a tuning fork for the unconscious. And what he discovered stunned him. He once told the story of a patient trapped in anxiety about marriage. The man had a deeply ingrained mother complex and feared that his partner might become overbearing. Jung turned to the I Ching. He cast the hexagrams, and it gave him hexagram 44 coming to meet. The commentary read, "The maiden is powerful. One should not marry such a maiden." It was the precise language that reflected the man's fear, but more than that, it revealed the timing of the moment. The psychological truth had mirrored itself in the outer world. There was no causal link, but there was meaning. Jung saw this again and again. And after decades of working with the I Ching, he said, "For more than 30 years, I have studied this oracle method of exploring the unconscious. It has proven to me of uncommon significance." He realized he was working with a principle entirely different from causality. Causality tells us how one event causes the next. But synchronicity tells us something else, that events can be linked not by cause, but by meaning. It's not about what makes something happen. It's about why it matters when it does. You know, Jung said once, there are strange abilities of the psyche. It isn't entirely bound by space and time. You can have dreams or visions of the future. You can see around corners. Only ignorance denies these things. They are real. They've always been real. What Jung dared to say long before quantum physics and spiritual psychology would catch up was this: the psyche isn't a prisoner of time, and the universe doesn't just speak in facts. It speaks in symbols, patterns, and timing. And if we learn to listen, we'll find that the cosmos has been whispering to us all along. These insights reveal something astonishing. The psyche is not bound by space and time, at least not entirely. And if even part of the psyche lives outside those constraints, then we are dealing with something beyond physical law, not in a metaphorical sense, but in a practical, experiential way. This means that some part of us, our inner being, continues to exist outside of linear time, beyond the rules of cause and effect. It hints at a form of consciousness that transcends the material, reaching into something far more mysterious. And in that realm, archetypes come alive. Jung often described the archetype not just as a symbol, but as a force, a living presence within the psyche. It doesn't ask for permission. It doesn't wait for logic. It grabs you like a seizure. Take falling in love at first sight, Jung explained. You don't choose it. It seizes you. Somewhere in your unconscious, there's an image, your type. And you meet someone who reflects that image, and you're instantly overwhelmed. You're gone. And later, you may realize it was a terrible mistake. That's the anima. That's the archetype speaking. He gave another example. When a man sings very high, he thinks he must have a deeply spiritual character just because he can hit the high notes. But when the woman marries him, she's bitterly disappointed. That's the animus, another archetype playing its part. These powerful energies aren't rational. They don't follow cause and effect. But they're meaningful, and they shape our lives from the inside out. While causality explains how one event leads to another, like a cue striking a billiard ball, synchronicity is different. It's not about sequence, it's about significance. Jung asked the question science often avoids. Why do some things happen at the exact moment they need to? What does it mean when, at the precise instant a distant loved one passes, a bird crashes into your window? It's not about superstition, it's about pattern, resonance. Jung believed these meaningful coincidences pointed to another kind of principle, one that wasn't causal, but acausal. He called it synchronicity. He drew partly from the work of Hermann Usener, who explored the roots of religious experience. Jung extended that line of thought into the unconscious mind, where he found that synchronistic events emerge from the alignment of two psychic states, one in the conscious mind and one in the unconscious. And when those two align internally and externally, the universe seems to speak. It's uncomfortable, Jung admitted, because I like to believe I'm the only master in my house. But I must confess, there's someone else living here, and they know things I don't. This someone else is what Jung called the unconscious. It has its own intentions, its own timing, and when it wants to break through, it will. Jung illustrated this through a story of one of his most famous patients. She was a woman whose strict rationalism had walled off her capacity to believe in anything beyond logic. During therapy, she told Jung about a strange dream. She had been given a golden scarab, a symbol of rebirth in Egyptian mythology. As she spoke, a tapping noise came from the window behind them. Jung turned, opened it, and in flew a golden-green scarab beetle, a species rare for that region and time of year. She was stunned. So was Jung, and in that moment, something in her cracked open. Her rationalism lost its grip. It was the symbol from her dream appearing in the real world at the precise moment she was discussing it. There was no explanation, but there was meaning, and that's what mattered. To Jung, events like this were glimpses behind the veil. They were expressions of the unus mundus, the one world, beneath all worlds, where psyche and matter are not two things but one reality wearing different masks. The physicist Wolfgang Pauli, a close collaborator of Jung, called this unity a kind of cosmic clock, where everything has its appointed time and place, even if we can't see the mechanism. Jung agreed, and sometimes he saw it in dreamlike visions. I was out in nature, he recalled, standing in a field of golden wheat ripe for harvest. I felt like a giant, and I held her in my arms like a child. The wind moved across the field in waves, and with those waves I swayed, rocking her gently to sleep. She felt it like she was being held in the arms of a god. When asked what she experienced in that moment, she said, "You see it in me." Jung replied, "That clicked." She touched something ancient, something pagan. It came straight from the archetype, and in touching it, she felt whole for the first time. That is the essence of Jung's work, not just explaining the mind, but reuniting the soul with the cosmos through symbol synchronicity and self. Carl Jung's idea of archetypes offers one of the most profound insights into how human behavior, dreams, and destiny are shaped not by external events, but by internal patterns far older than we are. Archetypes, according to Jung, aren't just recurring themes in myth or literature. They are primordial blueprints, deeply embedded patterns of instinctual behavior that live within our unconscious psyche, organizing everything from our emotional reactions to the symbols in our dreams. They are not learned, they are inherited, and they form the invisible architecture of what Jung called the collective unconscious, a shared psychic realm common to all human beings containing the symbolic imagery of all creation. Think of it this way: your dreams, your stories, your gut feelings, and your personal struggles. They may feel unique, but they arise from the same psychic field that shaped myths in ancient Egypt, songs in the Amazon, and symbols in Buddhist mandalas. It is the master pattern of life. These archetypes move and arrange psychic material in meaningful ways, not only inside the mind, but in the physical world as well. They're not simply internal constructs. They bridge the invisible with the visible. And yet, you can't see an archetype directly. You can't touch it or measure it. That's why Jung referred to them as psychoid, soul-like. They are real, but they exist just beyond the threshold of form. They operate at the border between mind and matter. This means, when something meaningful happens in your life, a coincidence too uncanny to ignore, it may not be caused by logic, but it's still held together by meaning. And that meaning rests on an archetypal foundation. Archetypes don't just shape our personal experiences. They manifest through cultural myths, religious visions, collective beliefs, and even societal upheavals. They are the psychological forces behind revolutions, awakenings, and generations of repeating patterns. And all of it points back to what Jung called the unus mundus, the one world, a unified field of consciousness in which all things are connected. If mandala symbolism is the psychological equivalent of the unus mundus Jung wrote, then synchronicity is its parapsychological equivalent. In other words, synchronicity is how the one world speaks. And this one world, this field of consciousness isn't stable. It's fragile. As Jung once warned, the world hangs on a thin thread, and that thread is the psyche of man. It's not natural disasters or nuclear bombs that pose the greatest threat. It's us, our unexamined thoughts, our repressed fears, our collective shadow. Yes, he said, we are the great danger. The psyche is the great danger. What if something goes wrong with the psyches? And today we're seeing exactly what he meant. But Jung didn't leave us in despair. He pointed us toward hope, toward awareness, toward wholeness. Because the moment we begin to understand our own inner world, we begin to see its reflection in the outer world. And that awareness alone can change the trajectory of a life or a civilization. In psychotherapy, this is what makes real healing possible. It's not just one person treating another, it's two psyches entering a shared field. And that field, what Jung called the psychoid realm, is where true transformation takes place. It's not about fixing what's broken. It's about revealing what's already whole beneath the noise. This field transcends the illusion that we are separate. Analyst and patient, friend and stranger, self and other. They all meet in this deeper dimension of experience. And it is in these shared spaces, especially when emotions run high or time seems suspended, that synchronistic events most often arise. Because psychic life is not a solo act. It is a shared reality, a unitary field. At the heart of this field is what Jung referred to as the pleroma, the fullness. It is a state where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. To live in touch with the pleroma is to live in resonance with the unfolding pattern of the cosmos. It is to understand that everything that will happen has already happened somewhere outside of time. And that, Jung said, is the magic of synchronicity. Not a prediction, not a superstition, but a glimpse into the sacred geometry of meaning, silently organizing the chaos of our lives. To recognize synchronicity is to begin reading the secret language of the universe. But to harness it, to live in alignment with it, is to open the door to insight, transformation, and a more authentic life. Jung believed that synchronicities weren't random miracles, they were meaningful guideposts. They can show up in many forms, each carrying a different kind of message. By learning to identify them and aligning with Hermetic principles, we can begin to navigate life with deeper purpose and spiritual intelligence. Here are the 5 most common types of synchronicities and how to engage with them. Warning or alert synchronicities. These tend to surface before crisis, stress, or transition, like an intuitive alarm system. How to work with them. Become radically present. Pay attention to subtle cues. An offhand remark, a repeated symbol, a dream that lingers. Often these messages show up quietly before something happens. Hermetic principle. Vibration. Nothing rests. Everything moves. Everything vibrates. 2. Confirmation synchronicities. These arrive to reassure you that you're on the right path even if doubt creeps in. How to work with them. Keep a synchronicity journal. Write down moments that feel too meaningful to be coincidence. Patterns will emerge, affirming your alignment. Hermetic principle. Correspondence as above, so below. As within, so without. Prophetic synchronicities. These are symbols of what's ahead, nudges from the deeper mind calling you into transformation. How to work with them. If your life feels stagnant and synchronicity goes silent, it may be time to break routine, to take risks, and allow new archetypal patterns to emerge. Hermetic principle, mentalism. The all is mind. The universe is mental. 4. Manifestation synchronicities. These occur when inner intent and outer reality meet the result of coherence between thought, emotion, and action. How to work with them. Act. Don't wait. Take inspired steps toward your deeper longing. Synchronicity often follows courage. Hermetic principle, cause and effect. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Opportunity synchronicities. These are those rare intersections when timing, preparation, and resonance converge perfectly. How to work with them. Strengthen your discernment. Ask yourself, is this coming from fear or from soul? Learn to trust the pull of your inner compass over external expectations. Hermetic principle, polarity. Everything is dual. Everything has its pair of opposites. And if you start to notice cycles, emotional patterns, seasons of challenge followed by expansion, that's synchronicity too. This aligns with the principle of rhythm. Everything flows in and out. All things rise and fall. And finally, there is the balance between masculine and feminine energies, between doing and being, logic and intuition, initiation and surrender. This is the principle of gender. Gender is in everything. Everything carries both forces within. When we align with these subtle forces, when we live in rhythm with archetypes, symbols, and intuitive timing, we begin to see that life is not linear, but alchemical. It's not just moving forward, it's evolving inward. And that brings us back to where we began with Jung and his search for something hidden between past and present. I was always looking for something in between, something that linked that remote past with the present moment. And I found, to my amazement, it is alchemy. It is the basis of our modern way of conceiving things, and therefore it is as if it were right under this realm of consciousness, giving a wonderful picture of how the development of archetypes moves. That's what this journey is. the unfolding of archetypes through time, from ancient symbols to modern choices. And if we pay attention, we begin to see the present moment is not separate from the past. It is shaped by it. And the future, it's already stirring just beneath the surface. Synchronicity invites us to listen, to remember, and to awaken to the pattern behind the pattern. Because once you recognize the symbols, you don't walk through life alone anymore. You walk with meaning.